Thank you so much, Janine Yunus, for speaking with me today. Your litigation counsel for the new Civil Liberties Alliance. Could you tell me how you're involved in a landmark litigation case filed by two US attorney generals against the US federal government over online censorship?
Yeah, so I came to be involved in it because I had actually filed a very similar suit earlier in March on behalf of three Twitter users, Mark Changizi, Michael Singer, and Daniel Coatson, who had all been suspended for various periods of time. Two are now suspended permanently from Twitter. And they had been suspended for making, non-government approved statements about masks, vaccine mandates, the vaccines themselves, and lockdowns. And their views were, very much within the realm of what should be, legitimate scientific discourse. Masks maybe don't work that well. Do children really need the vaccine? Should people be forced to get the vaccine at threat of losing their jobs? Those were the sort of tweets that led to their suspensions from Twitter. So I was aware that the members of the Biden administration, especially his then press secretary, Jennifer Psaki, the Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, had made statements to tech companies saying that if they didn't censor people more, if they didn't increase censorship on these COVID-related matters, especially people who question the vaccines, that they would face consequences in the form of regulatory or other legal action. Now, when a lot of people think that this is private companies doing the censorship on their own, but when the government is using private companies or telling private companies what to do to censor people and to censor certain views, that's a First Amendment violation. So I had filed that suit. Unfortunately, it was dismissed. And by coincidence, I guess, on the same day, the attorneys general of Missouri and Louisiana filed their own lawsuit on behalf of their citizens. They were aware of my suit, and I believe that they sort of used some of the ideas in there, and they actually used declarations from our plaintiffs. Our plaintiffs weren't plaintiffs in their case, but they used it to sort of demonstrate what was going on and buttress the case. So they wanted to include private plaintiffs, including Martin Kulldorff, Jay Bhattacharya, two of the people who wrote the Great Barrington Declaration, Aaron Kheriaty, who was a professor of medical ethics at UC Irvine before he got fired for not getting the vaccine, ironically, being a professor of medical ethics, and Jill Hines, who runs an organization called Health Freedom Louisiana. So attorneys general cannot represent private individuals. So they asked NCLA to represent them in the lawsuit. And so we joined on their behalf.
I see. So it's interesting. So the two US attorney generals, one from Missouri and one from Louisiana, they were representing the people from their state.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's how it works. So they can't represent like a certain individual who brings a certain claim. They are claiming that all of their citizens' First Amendment rights are being violated by these policies. And also there's a sort of corollary to the First Amendment right to speak, and that's the First Amendment right to receive information. So everybody's First Amendment rights are being violated, when the views of Dr. Bhattacharya or Dr. Kulldorff or Alex Berenson, for instance, are censored by the government.
Yes, exactly. So there's just literally just one official narrative sort of being allowed to sort of, be circulated around social media. And that's the only narrative that people have allowed to be exposed to. Yeah, it's just so shocking. Who are you representing in the case? Is it the two of the plaintiffs, or
no, all four of the ones I mentioned: Bhattacharya, Kulldorff, Kheriaty, and Jill Hines. There is a fifth private plaintiff, Jim Hoft, who runs Gateway Pundit. We are not representing him. Another private attorney is representing him.
And when did you file the lawsuit exactly?
So they actually filed the lawsuit without us on May 5th. I remember because it was the same day my suit was dismissed. And I happen to remember it was Cinco de Mayo because we were having a margarita party. So they asked us to join. They were going to amend the complaint. You have the right to amend a complaint once without getting permission from the judge. So they were going to amend the complaint and add the private plaintiffs for various reasons. They thought that they had really strong claims. It would strengthen the case to sort of have private people who had been censored on social media. and especially these people. And, I think one of the interesting things about this case is the First Amendment, for the most part, protects people saying things that are not true or that are not proven. People have the right to say wrong things. That's often how we reach the truth, with some exceptions for defamation, slander, stuff like that. But, saying that the vaccines have a microchip really is First Amendment protected speech. But that isn't as compelling of a case. It might not sway a judge the same way that showing sort of top scientists in their field are actually being silenced by the government because they disagree with the government.
And just we've got Jay Bhattacharya, Martin Kulldorff. They're the co-authors of the Great Barrington Declaration. It's just really shocking how their views on lockdowns and how basically there's no unscientific, essentially. So I know they were very vocal against the lockdowns, but the fact that they were just so heavily censored just because they were offering an alternative way of responding to the pandemic, it's just really shocking.
It is.
Yeah. So could you elaborate? You had a recent victory, so congratulations to you. Could you elaborate on what has gone on recently with the lawsuit?
So the latest was we got a whole bunch of discovery. The judge had granted the motion for discovery in support of a.
Just for people who don't know legal speak.
Yeah.
Could you explain the legal term of discovery?
Yes. So discovery means that we can get documents or have certain people answer questions. So it usually involves a lot of emails. In this case, it involved emails and other things, for instance, slides of presentations that were given, just a lot of internal documents that you wouldn't really otherwise have access to.
Right. So the judge has ordered for the discovery to take place. Is there a deadline when is it? And it's obviously it's Anthony Fauci, right? And his press.
So initially, it's a little complicated. Initially, he had ordered discovery from. It was a more vague order. It was various federal officials, but not necessarily specifically named ones, because part of the process of getting discovery is you don't necessarily know who's involved, and then you start to get some stuff, and then you start to learn names, and you're like, oh, okay, we want those people's emails too, because we see they're in this correspondence. So part of it was sort of negotiating with the other side who we get. The judge also, in a very unusual move, allowed us to get third-party discovery from the tech companies themselves. So even though they aren't defendants, we're only suing the government, we got documents from them. And that actually showed that there were more agencies and more federal officials involved than the government had let on.
Is it possible just to list some of these federal agencies involved?
Sure. I don't know all of them off the top of my head, so I could go get it if you want. But
fine, just the main ones that you.
Yeah, the CDC, DHS, and then HHS, NIH, and then there are a number of sub agencies. So one of the big ones within DHS is CISA. It's like the cybersecurity. And then there had been this new agency, the Disinformation Governance Board. But once the public learned about that, was disassembled.
It's the Ministry of Truth, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So what has stood out to you? So obviously, you've been looking through, I guess, thousands of documents, right?
Yeah.
Has anything jumped out to you? Are you able to speak about the evidence you're seeing? And you must, obviously, you said that there's a trickle effect of emails coming through. What have you seen so far that has been the most shocking to you?
Yeah, well, there's a lot. So first of all, to clarify, one of the remaining disputes, which was the victory last week, was whether Anthony Fauci and the White House press secretary would have to turn over discovery as well. So the government was saying that they shouldn't have to, and they were citing internal White House privilege, which doesn't apply because we were asking for their correspondence with tech companies. So the judge ruled in our favor, said that Fauci and Jean-Pierre have to turn over their correspondence related to this matter and to answer some questions. This applies also to the spokesperson's predecessor, Jennifer Psaki. So we'll get that stuff as well. So there's more to come. But what I would say some of the most interesting stuff so far is, I mean, there's clearly this massive coordinated effort that the government and the tech companies are working really, really closely. They're constantly giving presentations about like what to censor, telling the tech companies to watch out for this kind of thing, this kind of topic should be censored. And, you know, some of it is the vaccines have a microchip, or the vaccines are causing people to drop dead within 5 years or whatever. But then some of it is maybe children don't need the vaccine, maybe people with natural immunity don't need the vaccine. So the tech companies are being told that this is misinformation and it should be censored. Now, one of the sort of points of contention in this lawsuit, and I think it's going to be the sticking point most likely, is there's some people are of the view that if the private companies want to work with the government to help the government accomplish its aims, they're free to do that. If they all think that we should be censoring people on this level, that's fine. I disagree with that from a First Amendment perspective. I think that if the companies are doing the government's bidding, they're effectively government actors. And then, you know, that's a First Amendment issue, and you can sue both the government and the tech companies on that theory. However, if the government is coercing the tech companies and the companies don't actually want to do that, that's an airtight First Amendment case. So that's like less controversial. And I think that this correspondence reveals that in spades, really. So in addition to the public threats that these officials have made that I talked about earlier, saying we're going to regulate these companies, they're going to face other legal consequences if they don't censor people more. There are some of the discovery we got corroborates that theory. So there's, for instance, there's a high up executive at Facebook or Meta, whatever you call it, corresponding with the Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy. And this is after the president had accused the tech companies of killing people by not doing more censoring on the vaccine misinformation, quote unquote. And the Facebook executive is saying, I think Murthy says, how's it going? Basically, and the Facebook executive says, well, it's not going so well. You know, it's not so great to be accused of murder or something like that. But we're going to do more to de-escalate and basically try to make the government happy. Now, that's a clear indication that they're not doing this of their own free will. They're doing this because they're afraid of the government.
Yes.
I mean,
it almost sounds like a mafia style way of doing, you know, of conducting yourself. Like, we're going to lean on you. If you don't do what we are telling you to do, you're going to get, you know, fines. You're going to be penalized. We're going to regulate you. So it's just, it's a mafia style government, it seems, doesn't it? The way they handle this, it's so shocking. And when you mention about the private companies at the point of contention, okay, so but if you think about, let's just take Twitter, in a way it is an online public space, if you think about it like that and define it in those terms. And that way, you know, where people are able to voice their opinion, and obviously we know in reality that's it's not really the case. You have to almost censor yourself. But if they are supposed to be a public space, then surely the First Amendment comes into play, because these are ordinary citizens expressing their opinions, freedom of speech. What would you say to that?
That's a good question. And some people definitely hold that view. So I'm not really approaching the case from that perspective, because I don't think we have to. It got enough evidence
just to show that, in a way, that there's the overreach happening from the government, right?
Right. So that one of the reasons I haven't approached it that way is that our organization doesn't sue private companies. We only sue the government. So that hasn't really been the strategy I'm looking at. I do think a case can be made that this is sort of effectively the public square. You know, we never had social media before this era. So, you know, the founding fathers obviously did not contemplate Twitter and what it would mean, you know, for somebody to be silenced by being kicked off Twitter, where you have the most ability to air your views.
Is that the sort of route that Alex Berenson was taking? Because I know yeah.
Yeah, and a couple of other people have done that. So, and I think Berenson is now considering suing the government based on what he's said, because and Berenson has probably the strongest claim of any American, I would say, because he, you know, as you probably know, he got these emails through discovery in his case, showing that there was internal correspondence between Twitter employees saying that they had a meeting with the White House that went pretty well, but there were some tough questions about why Berenson hadn't been kicked off Twitter. Mercifully, we had answers mercifully, again, like the mafia, the mafia dynamic there. You don't use that term if you feel like you're in a relationship of equals where you're not, you know, bound to do what the other person wants or fear the consequences. So he has quite a good claim. And he had another aspect of his case was that he had received personal assurances from Twitter executives that he hadn't violated the rules. And just then, and then shortly thereafter, Anthony Fauci singled him out publicly and said he was a menace or a danger to society because he said maybe all young people don't have to get the vaccine. And then Biden said that that social media was killing people by not censoring him. And that same day, Berenson was locked out of his account, and this was just again after receiving those assurances. So in my opinion, Berenson has like a slam dunk First Amendment claim.
Yes, yes. Could you tell me, on behalf of the plaintiffs, your clients who you're representing, could you tell me more about, you know, the sort of the censorship that you know, obviously they've been heavily targeted. Could you give me some examples how big tech have targeted them and censored their sort of voice, so to speak?
Yeah. So first of all, after they wrote the Great Barrington Declaration, do you want me to explain what that is?
Yeah, for people who don't know, yes.
So the Great Barrington Declaration was sort of a short treatise or document where these three epidemiologists, Kulldorff, Bhattacharya, and another one from Oxford named Censorship Gupta, sort of eschewed lockdowns, said that they did more harm than good, and that rather than sort of shutting down society broadly, we should embrace focused protection and devote resources to protecting vulnerable people while letting everyone else go about their lives. This was met with extreme hostility from the mainstream media, and it, you know, was denounced immediately by Fauci and Francis Collins of the NIH and various other high ups in government. So that first of all, the Great Barrington Declaration itself was censored very quickly. I believe its page was entirely taken down from Facebook. It became hard to find in searches. You know, like Google sort of makes it difficult to find certain things. Yeah. And then Kulldorff, at the time, Bhattacharya wasn't really on social media. Kulldorff was the most active, and he had a lot of his posts on Twitter and LinkedIn censored. And then I believe in March of 2021, a YouTube video of the three of them, Bhattacharya, Kulldorff, Gupta, Scott Atlas, who had advised Trump on COVID, and the Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida had a roundtable discussion in which they were discussing the problems with mask and vaccine mandates. That video was taken down from YouTube. And so now we don't know whether this was directly ordered by the White House or by Fauci and Collins. I suspect that we may find information to that effect, because there were other emails that I think they were released about a year ago between you know, I forgot exactly. I know some of them were from Fauci, and I think they were to a guy named Greg Gonsalves at Yale, who's very pro-lockdown. And they were saying we have to take down the declaration immediately. And it's clear that they were working with certain media outlets to do so. And what they did was smear the scientists as Koch-funded right-wingers, and just tried to discredit them entirely.
Would you say that from what you've seen, obviously the evidence you've seen, so do you think it's purely been the government coercing big tech, or has there been an element of collusion?
I think that you could read some of the emails that way. But I think that's a mistake, sort of, to have that interpretation, because it just all has to be looked at in the broader context of these threats. And, you know, there might be some sort of mid-level employee at Facebook or Twitter who isn't really privy to all of this stuff and who's been told just do what the government wants, you know. And so they sound very cheery, but that doesn't mean that what's sort of going up and coming down from the top isn't the result of coercion, which I think, again, based on some of the things I discussed and some that we haven't gotten to yet, it's coercion and not so much collusion. Never, that being said, I still think if it's collusion, I think then that it's still a First Amendment violation, and then the tech companies should be sued as well.
Right, right. So do you feel you have enough evidence? Obviously, is it still sort of early days in the lawsuit?
Yeah, yes, but that said, I think there's definitely enough evidence. I think we could win without anything more. I myself think that one could win just based on the the public statements that these government officials had made, and that was sort of the main evidence that I had in the Chingizi, the earlier suit.
It is versus Joe Biden et al., isn't it? It's the Biden administration. So
yeah.
if the Biden administration is found to be in violation of the First Amendment, what are the ramifications of that?
Yeah, well, we're not asking for any money, so you usually don't get money for these things, but we just want a court to recognize that this is a First Amendment violation. I think it's really important for the First Amendment going forward in the contemporary era where social media is so important. I think it's really important that there be a hard line drawn. The government cannot tell social media companies what perspectives to censor, who to censor. Apart from perhaps very dangerous direct threats. But ironically, as most people know, there are plenty of people on Twitter, like I forgot the Ayatollah of Iran or something, who said that all Jews should be killed, and those people are somehow kept on. Well, if you question whether masks work, you can get kicked off.
I know. Why do you think, I mean, this is just, just breaking it down to just, obviously, this is censorship, blatant, rampant censorship over the past really few years. I mean, do you see, so if you win, do you see then big tech having to sort of step down from that role and allow sort of, freedom of speech to sort of come back again in the public space here? Could this be a really pivotal turning point? Because I just see the censorship just been getting worse and worse and worse. Do you see light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak?
That's a good question. I mean, if the ruling is basically based sort of on what the government is doing, the tech companies wouldn't necessarily have to reduce censorship. They could say, well, actually, we want to keep doing this. Now, I don't think they would from a business perspective. Otherwise, they wouldn't, they would have been doing more of this before if they thought it was wise. I mean, you're kicking off people with huge followings. That can't be, that doesn't make sense economically.
Yes.
But theoretically, if it's just a ruling about what the government could do, the tech companies could continue to do it, which is why, maybe someone else will bring another case that's making the argument that, look, the tech companies can't even voluntarily do this kind of thing on the public square theory that you mentioned earlier.
Yes, yes. Yes, yeah, it'd be interesting, really interesting to see what will happen out of this. And I mean, obviously, you have the sort of the rise in alternative social media companies like Gettr, and it's sort of a lot of people are moving to those type of social media places as a sort of alternative. So they're free to sort of make the posts that they want to, or speak how they want to. Yeah, is there anything else you can tell us, Janine, with the case? When is the next hearing? When is the next sort of would you
the next sort of important date is the judge had ordered Fauci and Jean-Pierre to answer these questions and turn over the documents within 21 days, and that was last week. So that should be in about 2 weeks. Yeah. Sometimes there are like minor delays. They'll ask for a couple more days while they're getting stuff together, but should be in about 2 weeks. After that, it should move forward to arguing the preliminary injunction issue. The government has moved to dismiss, but I think we have every indication that the judge is not going to grant that motion, given that he's found there to be enough to move forward with discovery.
That's great. But yeah, I mean, I commend you. You've done excellent work, and I wish you all the luck, but I just, I think it's just brilliant what you're doing. And I just wanted to ask, I mean, do you have a lot of lawyers helping you in this case? Are you sort of all working together, or um, how do you sort
We're
of
yeah.
load?
We're working with the attorneys general closely. So the Missouri Attorney General is leading the case, and they have quite a few people in their office working on it. And then the Louisiana Attorney General is also involved, and then me and a colleague here. So yeah, there are quite a few lawyers working on it, which is good because there's a lot of documents.
And I just wanted to just think, I mean, is there a way that sort of Fauci could even sort of not, I mean, obviously we know that an order for discovery has been made, him and the press secretary, but what happens if they don't disclose, all the emails and the documents? Like, is there someone who will kind of audit and go through, I don't know, we have to just give up his laptop? Like, how does it get enforced?
Yeah, I think there is a bit of an honor system.
Right.
And unfortunately, and we'll likely never know everything. We know, some of the emails show that Mark Zuckerberg of Meta gave Fauci his private phone number. We'll
Right.
probably never know the contents of those conversations.
Yes.
And I assume a lot of stuff there are a lot of indications that a lot of communications occurred in phone conversations or Zooms that we'll probably never know. So we might never see sort of the most inculpatory information unless somebody comes forward, and somebody with a lot of inside knowledge and says, you know what, I decided this is wrong. I'm going to tell you everything.
Yeah.
One thing I can say is that because we got discovery from the third parties, the tech companies themselves, that sort of helped, because the government would say, like, we've given you everything, and we'd be like, wait a second, but we got these emails from Facebook and you
Yes.
so they would initially led us to believe that there were only a few agencies involved, and it was because of the tech companies. We realized there are 11 now that we know of. There could be more.
So the tech companies, just before, I know your time is precious, but it's Facebook, Twitter. Is it like LinkedIn? I mean,
Yeah, so the judge said you can get discovery from up to 5. So we chose Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google, which owns YouTube, so that includes YouTube. And what's the other one? Sorry, there's one more that's not coming to mind. Yeah.
Well, that there's quite a lot there, and yeah, I understand the significance and importance of the third party discovery.
Yeah. Well, one thing that may interest you is I think there may be a tension between what the tech companies, how they decide they want to approach sort of what's going on, and the government. Because if the tech companies say, we wanted to do this, we were working with the government, then they face these sort of First Amendment lawsuits on the theory that they're government actors. So they may be better off going with the coercion theory. Yeah, we were being coerced. We didn't really want to do this. So we'll see what they start saying about it. But yeah, there's definitely tension.
So because obviously the tech companies are involved, I understand that you, New Civil Liberties Alliance, you just, suing just the government.
Yeah.
But do you see then other sort of legal firms stepping in and then actually suing the tech companies themselves based on all the evidence, based on the disclosure?
I have no doubt that will happen. Yeah, there'll be many people eager to.
Are we expecting a tsunami of lawsuits happening this?
Yeah, I would. And I think they may be waiting to see a little bit how this one plays out to see what strategy to take. But I would expect in the next year there'll be quite a number of lawsuits.
And if the plaintiffs win, would they be punitive damages involved, do you think?
They could sue for damages. So Berenson got damages, I believe. He showed that he had been making a living off this, and having received personal assurances his account wasn't in danger, he was relying on it. So to just shut it down, he lost money. I think I don't know that like some average person with 50 Twitter followers would be able to get damages. I think you'd have to show that you had lost money professionally as a result. But yeah, certainly people with large Twitter followings who rely on it as part of their job, I think could.
Yes. Thank you. That's fascinating. Thank you for all of that. Really informative. And again, wish you best of luck with everything. Thank you.